So go ahead and grab your Dinosaurs Before Dark book, and we are on chapter 5, so you can read along with me. Also, go ahead and grab your book study. We're going to go over that right after we read chapters 5 and 6.
Go, go, said Jack. He threw his notebook onto his pack. He pushed Annie toward the rope ladder. Bye, Henry, she said. Go, said Jack. He gave Annie a big push. Quit it, she said, but he started up the ladder. Jack scrambled after her. They tumbled into the tree house. They were panting as they looked out the window at the dinosaur. He was standing on the hilltop, eating flowers off a tree. Oh man, whispered Jack, we are in a long time ago. The dinosaur looked like a huge rhinoceros, only he had 3 horns instead of 1. 2 long ones above his eyes and 1 on his nose. He had a big shield-like thing behind his head. Triceratops, said Jack. Does he eat people? Whispered Annie. I'll look it up. Jack grabbed the dinosaur book. He flipped through the pages. There, he said. He pointed to a picture of a Triceratops. He read the caption. The Triceratops lived in the Cretaceous period. This plant-eating dinosaur weighed over 12,000 pounds. Jack slammed the book shut. Just plants, no meat. Let's go see him, said Annie. Are you nuts? Said Jack. Don't you want to take notes about him? Asked Annie. We're probably the first people in the whole world to see a real, live Triceratops. Jack sighed. She was right. Let's go, he said. He shoved the dinosaur book into his pack. He slung it over his shoulder and started down the ladder. On the way down, Jack stopped. He called up to Annie. Just promise you won't pet him. I promise. Promise you won't kiss him. I promise. Promise you won't talk to him. I promise. Promise you won't. Go, go, she said. Jack went. Annie followed. When they stepped off the ladder, the pteranodon gave them a kind look. Annie blew a kiss at him. Be back soon, Henry, she said cheerfully. Shush, said Jack, and he led the way through the ferns, slowly and carefully. When they reached the bottom of the hill, he kneeled behind a fat bush. Annie knelt beside him and started to speak. Shush! Jack put his fingers to his lips. Annie made a face. Jack peeked out at the Triceratops. The dinosaur was incredibly big, bigger than a truck. He was eating the flowers off a magnolia tree. Jack slipped his notebook out of his pack. He wrote, Eats flowers. Annie nudged him. Jack ignored her. He studied the Triceratops again. He wrote, Eats slowly. Annie nudged him hard. Jack looked at her. Annie pointed to herself. She walked her fingers through the air. She pointed to the dinosaur. She smiled. Was she teasing? She waved at Jack. Jack started to grab her. She laughed and jumped away. She fell into the grass, in full view of the Triceratops. Get back, Jack whispered. Too late. The big dinosaur had spotted Annie. He gazed down at her from the hilltop. Half of a magnolia flower was sticking out of his mouth. Oops, said Annie. Get back, Jack shouted at her. He looks nice, Jack. Nice? Watch out for his horns, Annie. No, he's nice, Jack. Nice? But the Triceratops just gazed calmly down at Annie. Then he turned and looped away down the side of the hill. Bye, said Annie. She turned back to Jack. See? Jack grunted, but he wrote in his notebook, Nice. Come on, let's look around some more, said Annie. As Jack started after Annie, he saw something glittering in the tall grass. He reached out and picked it up. A medallion. A gold medallion. A letter was engraved on the medallion. A fancy M. Oh man, someone came here before us, Jack said softly. Chapter 6, Dinosaur Valley. Annie, look at this, Jack called. Look what I found. Annie had gone up to the hilltop. She was busy picking a flower from a magnolia tree. Annie, look, a medallion! But Annie wasn't paying attention to Jack. She was staring at something on the other side of the hill. Oh, wow, she said. Annie! Clutching her magnolia flower, she took off down the hill. Annie, come back, Jack shouted, but Annie had disappeared. I'm going to kill her, Jack muttered. He stuffed the gold medallion into his jean pocket. Then he heard Annie shriek, "Annie?" He heard another sound as well, a deep bellowing sound like a tuba. "Jack, come here," Annie called. "Annie!" He grabbed his backpack and raced up the hill. When he got to the top, he gasped. The valley below was filled with nests, big nests made out of mud, and the nests were filled with tiny dinosaurs. Annie was crouching next to one of the nests, and standing over her was a gigantic duck-billed dinosaur. "Don't panic, don't move," said Jack. He stepped slowly down the hill towards Annie. The huge dinosaur was towering above Annie, waving her arms, making her tube a sound. Jack stopped. He didn't want to get too close. He knelt on the ground. "Okay, move toward me slowly," he said. Annie started to stand up. "Don't stand, crawl," said Jack. Clutching her flower, Annie crawled towards Jack. The duck-billed dinosaur followed her, still bellowing. Annie froze. "Keep going," Jack said softly. Annie started crawling again. Jack inched farther down the hill until he was just an arm's distance from Annie. He reached out, and Jack grabbed her hand. He pulled Annie towards him. "Stay down," he said. He crouched next to her. "Bow your head. Pretend to chew." "Chew?" "Yes, I read that's what you do if a mean dog comes at you." "She's no dog, Jack," said Annie. "Just chew," said Jack. Jack and Annie both bowed their heads and pretended to chew. Soon the dinosaur grew quiet. Jack raised his head. "I don't think she's mad anymore," said Annie. "Thanks, Jack, for saving me," said Annie. "You have to use your brain," said Jack. "You can't just go running to a nest of babies. There's always a mother nearby." Annie stood up. "Annie!" Too late. Annie held out her magnolia flower to the dinosaur. "I'm sorry I made you worry about your babies," she said. The dinosaur moved closer to Annie, and she grabbed the flower from her. She reached for another. "No more," said Annie. The dinosaur let out a sad tuba sound. "But there are more flowers up there," Annie said. She pointed to the top of the hill. "I'll get you some." Annie hurried up the hill. The dinosaur waddled after her. Jack quickly examined the babies. Some were crawling out of their nests. Where were the other mothers? Jack took out the dinosaur book. He flipped through the pages. He found the picture of some duck-billed dinosaurs. He read the caption. "The Anatosaurus lives in colonies. While few mothers babysat the nests, others hunted for food. So there must be more mothers close by." "Hey, Jack," Annie called. Jack looked up. Annie was at the top of the hill, feeding magnolia flowers to a giant Anatosaurus. "She's nice too, Jack," said Annie. But suddenly the Anatosaurus made her terrible tuba sound. Annie crouched down and started to chew. The dinosaur barged down the hill. She seemed afraid of something. Jack put the book down on top of his pack. He hurried up to Annie. "I wonder why she ran away," said Annie. "We were starting to be friends." Jack looked around. What he saw in the distance almost made him throw up. An enormous, ugly monster was coming across the plain. He was walking on two big legs and swinging a long, thick tail and dangling two tiny arms. He had a huge head and his jaws were wide open. Even from far away, Jack could see his long, gleaming teeth. "Tyrannosaurus Rex," Jack whispered. "Whoa, that's getting kind of crazy." All right, so go grab your Dinosaurs Before Dark book study, and we'll go over what your job is to do this week. For this page, you're going to be going over chapter 5. If you notice, it has the page numbers where the answers are. Go ahead and finish these sentences. So, for example, the first one says, Jack and Annie go up into the treehouse. That's on page 24. That one's already done for you. Now, what did Jack and Annie learn? Look on page 25, and you're just going to write the rest of that sentence. Jack and Annie learn what? Same with Jack and Annie go. Where did they go? And that's on page 26, 27. Jack writes what on page 28, and so on. So that's how you are going to work on this page. Okay, for this next page, you're going to answer the first two questions with conclusions. You're not going to find the direct answers in the book, but you got to tell me what you think about Annie. Is she too careless for her own safety? Also, do Annie's actions make the story entertaining or frustrating? That is an opinion. You need to tell me two things, either whether it's entertaining or frustrating, and then give a reason why. For A and B, you just need to write 1 or 2 words to answer the questions. They don't need to be complete sentences, but that you will find in the book. For this one, you're going to use the vocabulary from chapter 6. And what you're going to do is you're going to read through these 5 words and you're going to insert only 4 of them in the paragraph and then read the sentence back to yourself to make sure it makes sense. And then at the bottom, you're going to draw a picture that shows the understanding of one vocabulary word. And don't forget to write the vocabulary word on the bottom of that box next to the word word. And this last page for chapter 6, for number 1, you are going to be answering the question. It may not be exactly in the book, but it's what you think. What is dangerous about Annie's situation? Also, number 2, you are going to color in 2 words that describe Jack's plan to save Annie and explain one of the words you chose from above. Then number 3, it says, based on the chapter, is Jack a good big brother? Yes or no? You're going to color in one of those. And for A, B, and C on chapter checkup, that will be directly in your book, so you can go back and look for those answers. Again, you don't need to write complete sentences because there's not a whole lot of room for that. All right, if you guys have any questions, please let me know.